Welcome to Internally Guided Life, a podcast to help you unlock a life of balance, fulfillment, and joy. I'm Kayla Sweet, and together we're going to have fun and create change from the inside out. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back, my friends. Today we are digging into a familiar topic that we cannot explore enough. So you all know my story with burning out, recovering from burnout, and that was kind of my portal, my entryway into life coaching as opposed to working in the mental health care system. And it's always such an honor when I get to bring someone else on the show who works in this realm. So today's guest is going to help me explore this. We're going to dig into her story, her approach that she's created, and just have a really grounded conversation about what matters when it comes to our self-care and preventing burnout. So today's guest is Jenny Lytle. Jenny has been a nurse for over 30 years, a registered nurse. She has written a book, so she's an author. She's a coach. She supports people through this journey, and she has a really powerful personal transformation story, which we all do. We have these interesting stories that bring us to our work, but I'm so excited to be here with her today. So with that, welcome, Jenny.
Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, Kayla.
So to start us out, I love to just dig into the personal first, and then we can get to the application and all of those things. But take us back to the beginning of your journey and tell us, I guess, what called you into nursing and how that has impacted your view of self-care, and then we'll move into your coaching career and the writing and all the other good things you're doing now.
Sure. So, well, my nursing career, like my idea, my thoughts that I wanted to be a nurse came from when I was young. I was in the hospital quite a bit when I was like 2, 3, 4, somewhere around there. Honestly, I don't really remember most of that, but I had a lot of lung issues and things, and basically they figured out that I just needed to build up an immune system, and so I did, and here I am, and I'm fine. But I remember the nurses' thermometers, and I thought they were so cool. And honestly, it's funny because they were like the holster kind, like they still have at a lot of hospitals and stuff. When they're not doing
Those
the
are kind of
forehead
cool.
ones.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I remember when I first, when I went to the ER, then like 25 years later. Well, no, many years later than that, I guess. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But when I did that, I was like, I get to have one of these cool thermometers. It's the little things, right?
Yes.
So, but I've always known that, I just like people, and I've always been a caregiver at heart. I'm somebody who, I like to come alongside people and try to help them. And so I then thought that I wanted to be a therapist of some sort, psychologist, psychiatrist, social worker. I knew I wanted to do something again with people and something with helping them in some way, but I wasn't really sure what that was going to look like. And I thought, because of kind of my own mental health struggles, I thought, well, maybe I want to go that route with it. But what ended up making me decide to go to nursing school instead was I was dating a guy that we got engaged. Thankfully, we didn't get married, but my mom wanted me to finish college first. And so I took a 1-year practical nursing program first. And I thought, okay, that's going to be the way. And my mom actually went with me because she had wanted to be a nurse, but instead had me when she was 18. So it was it was an interesting time. It was fun. And then I ended up going back for my associates and bachelor's and all of that. But that's kind of how all of the nursing part started.
That's so cool. It sounds like you knew from, yeah, a very young age, one, that nurses got to use cool equipment, but also that would be a way to care for people. And it is such an important role. I mean, I think of all of the nurses that I've worked with anytime I've encountered the healthcare system. And I mean, it makes or breaks your experience, your quality of care, but it's such a tax on the people within the healthcare system, within the nurses. So maybe I feel like this is a good entryway to tell me about your experiences within the system, the things you've loved, but also the challenges that you faced when it came to the stress management and the balance and what kind of led you into coaching.
Yeah. So even with my first nursing job, I worked in long-term care. I worked in a local nursing home. And even then, like I knew that there was there was more to do than there was time to do it in. And so it kind of already started out with that feeling like I can't do enough. Um, and there was that, and it's still this way where, you've got to get all these things done that you can't get done in this time frame, but you have to get all this documentation done too. And you can't have overtime, but you can't do it off the clock, but you've got to get it done. And it's like, but like all of this isn't possible. Like it wasn't possible 30 years ago, and it still isn't. And we're set up for failure in so many ways. And then that leads to either, getting burnout and, just kind of jaded and not really caring too much about what you're doing anymore, or just feeling awful because you know that there were things that you wanted to do better, people that you wanted to spend more time with that you weren't able to do. And that was kind of my first encounter with that. And I was there for about a year and a half, and then I ended up leaving there, and I did some other things in between. And then I ended up moving into hospice, where I loved and still love that. I still love aspects of that. But it was very easy to get caught up in everybody else's stuff, and especially when you're dealing with people at end of life. I mean, you're dealing with people who are dying. And so there's a sense of urgency. It's not like, oh, okay, well, I've got plenty of time to handle this. And it was very easy to lose my own identity a lot with that. I had horrible boundaries. And that after several years of all of that, and even being in different roles in the hospice company, I did some education and quality and training things with that. So, but either way, it I wanted to give more than maybe I should have. And that, coupled with not having the best time management skills, in some areas, it was kind of a perfect storm for burnout. And so that has led me to where I am now. But it's still something that I feel like when you're somebody who's been through that before, it's still kind of it's a slippery slope. I mean, we have that. It's like our bodies remember, hey, we're just gonna do this. But the difference is now is when I find myself getting near that, I'm getting a little too close to the edge, then I know what to do to bring myself back. So it's not I don't end up in that place that I was in for so long, unfortunately.
Yeah, I resonate so much with so many parts of your story. I think obviously coming from community mental health, it was within the healthcare system in a different aspect of it, but all of the pieces you shared of like wanting to do more than there
Hmm.
was time
Hmm.
available, wanting to connect more, seeing all of the things that maybe could have been done better, the time that could have been spent with people, really making their lives better, making them feel seen, making them feel heard. I loved working in community mental health, and I remember like always feeling like I could have, should have, wished there was a way to do more. Like nothing I could give would have ever been enough to what the patients deserved. And I'm hearing like
Hmm.
some of that echoing in what you're saying too. Like when you care so much and you really want to give the highest quality of care,
Hmm. Hmm.
that really does put you at risk for burnout when it's not paired with the good boundaries, like you mentioned. And it's so interesting because I read something recently and it was talking about how they've analyzed the statistics of burnout and who it happens to. And it happens to the people who care the most. It's happening to the highly empathetic people who
Mhm.
want to commit to excellence to whatever realm they're serving. And that's why we're seeing it so high in industries like healthcare. So it's really like the brave-hearted individuals, the ones who care the most that this is afflicting.
Mhm.
So it's just so interesting to me how many of us go through this, and there's just an endless need for people doing this work. So, learning the boundaries, learning to navigate that, and to be able to pull yourself back, that's hard. That's not
Mhm.
an easy thing to do. So, talk to me a little bit about how you developed that skill set and what else has kind of influenced your development of this unique process you've created.
Yeah, so I agree with what you're saying. It's those of us who do we really care, and so we give and we give and we give, and we keep hoping that it's going to be enough, and if we just work a little harder, if we do a little more, then we'll finally get there. And the reality is it's not going to happen. We have to do some work to adjust our own expectations and to give what we can give, and then to just to accept to a certain extent that like we can't fix everything all the time. And that's hard because we want to. And like you said, there's all these people who are so deserving. And so we want to be able to do all of those things, but um, there's so much red tape wrapped up in in the healthcare space. There's so much documentation. There's so many things that just make it impossible to do everything that we want to be able to do. And that's not even looking at shortages and things like that. So, for me myself, I knew that I knew that it had been time to leave my first hospice position for a while, but I had been there for a long time, and it was a locally owned company. I'd started when it was small, and I mean, it was like a dysfunctional family, and I loved the people that I worked with, and it, there were a lot of things though, a lot of things had changed as things do. And especially as we had grown and gotten bigger, and just as I had grown and changed myself. And so I knew that I knew that it was time to leave, but at the same time, I kind of resisted it because it was my comfort zone. And I think that's one of those things that I talk to people about now is that, a lot of times we stay in our comfort zone long after it's become uncomfortable because it's scary. It's scary to face the unknown. At least when we're in this position, we know what it is. Even if it's not uncomfortable, I mean, even if it's not comfortable, even if we don't really like it, like we know. And I think there's some saying about like, better the devil you know than the devil you don't, or something like
Yeah.
that. And so it was kind of like that. But finally I had there was just a situation that happened, and it was a hurtful situation, but when it did, I was like, okay, that's what I needed to be able to leave. And I knew in that moment, I was like, okay, I'm done. And so I believe it was the next day that I turned in my notice, and still it was hard. And honestly, I actually ended up going back to that company for a couple of years, and I still am very good friends with a lot of the people that are there. And it's a great organization. It was just time for me to be done with it. I was very happy about that at first. I mean, I went through, it was tough the first couple of days, and then I was like, because I took a little bit of time
Yeah.
off, and I thought, okay, this is awesome. Like I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but it's going to be great. And I'd take my kids to school and I'd drop them off, and I'd go to the park and I'd walk, and as I would do this every morning, and I'd have my 10,000 steps in before 8 or 9 o'clock. And I felt like I was killing it. And as I was walking one day, I I just had this thought that popped into my head, and it's actually how I start my book, and it's who am I? And I realized how much of my identity had really become wrapped up in what I did And, I mean, I was a hospice nurse and I was a hospice nurse for this particular company and I did it well. And there were so many other things in my life, I mean, like I was married and I had kids but when you're raising kids, it's like you don't always hear how great you're doing, it's and you don't always feel like you're doing a good job. And I was really struggling with a lot of that. And so I found a lot of validation in my work. And when I realized that I didn't have that, and I thought, oh, I don't know. I don't know who I am. And so I that kind of took me on a journey of coaching and lots of reading, lots of courses, programs, some therapy, and just figuring out like who am I and what is this next chapter going to look like. And then so I was able to get, some clarity. And I mean, I don't have everything all figured out, I,
We never
I
do.
exactly. And and that's why when I formed my company, which actually was a year to the day after I left my hospice
Mm.
position, it's Becoming Your Best with Jenny Lytle RN. And that's because I believe that we're always in that becoming stage. It's not something that we're ever going to arrive at. I want to always be becoming better, but also being happy with who I am in the moments, so it's that kind of double-edged uh sword there. And so I put together the becoming method as a way of taking the nursing process, which is, so in from the time we start in nursing school, there's a process that we go through. And so when we're looking at anything, we assess and then we diagnose and plan and implement and evaluate. And so using those things, I was able to expand those a little bit more. And so I took that into, baseline, where are you now, and excitement and the things that light you up, and then confidence as far as what it is that makes you, what really makes you come alive. And BOC. I'm sorry, BEC. I told you I haven't had a ton of sleep. Let me look at this because I can't spell becoming now. Only
It's hard
you.
to spell out loud.
It is, it is. I can't spell out loud normally, but usually I can do okay with this one. But I always do have it here just in case I have moments like this. So only you. So looking at the ways that, that we're wired as individuals and what is it that matters most to us. And so being able to put those things together so that we can maximize our impact and meaning, really looking at the things that matter most to you, because that may be very different than what matters most to me. And that's okay. That's my whole approach is based on, really personalizing our self-care and our stress relief, because it's not one size fits all. And sometimes we think it should be, so, and we don't like that shouldn't on ourselves anyway. So, and then intention, like what is it that you would like to uh, what would you like to accomplish? What is fearlessly pursuing your dreams look like for you? And then what do you need to do in order to do that? What's missing? And then go and, putting that into action. And then of course coming back and reevaluating, because we can
Yeah.
have a great plan but until we actually start doing it, you know, then there's tweaks that need to be made and we grow and we change and all of that. So it's just kind of a framework to be able to work through things um, a little more systematically than I did, so that people can get a more a transformation that doesn't take as long, that doesn't take as much money, that doesn't take as much time and effort, and it's still work, but it's asking those questions that help us get to the root of who we are and what it is that we really want, and then figuring out how to get there. And my my mom passed away suddenly, and that was really what. led me to know that I really wanted to focus on people who struggle with stress relief and self-care, because she was one of those people who was a caregiver. Like I said, we went to nursing school together, and she had some chronic health issues, and so she had been on disability for a while, but um she was still functioning, and I mean, she was able to walk, she lived independently, and she had an aneurysm that ruptured. And that was something that we had known for a long time that she had, but where it was kind of right in the middle of her brain. And because of that and the risks involved with it, she'd kind of put it off a little bit. But really, the main reason was because she had all these other things that she wanted to do, and most of them were for other people.
Mm.
And she was going to get around to, she was going to have that surgery soon. Uh, but soon doesn't always come when we keep putting things off. And I realized that I was kind of doing the same thing in some ways, and that so many of us are, people in general, but especially women, and in particular women who are, helpers, whether it's, nurses, aides, therapists, caregiver, just all of us that are in those helping kind of roles. It's so easy to put everybody's needs ahead of our own.
Yeah, I want to thank you for just sharing more detail into your story and your method, but especially sharing about the experience with your mother, because I feel like that is one that when I first heard of this story and you were talking to me before we came on the show, like it hit me in the heart, because how many people have I heard say that they're not scheduling a doctor's appointment because they don't have time on their schedule, or there's
Yes.
something weird that's happening, but they're waiting until a better time to address
Right,
it, or
right.
they know something's going on, but they're like, this could be any of us
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
are, oh yeah, I will schedule it when the time's convenient. I've got all of these other
Right.
people I'm caring for, and
Yeah.
then that time might not come. So,
Right. So we get those, oh, I'm having more headaches or I'm having trouble sleeping. And, those are those little ways that our body is saying, hey, something's not quite right here. You need to do something different. And we just keep pushing through. And that's, and sometimes, yes, there are times when we do need to push through. And there are times when it is something small and it's not anything to be super concerned about. But just taking the time to check in with ourselves. And that's something that we don't do. It's, oh, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm busy. Um,
mhm,
and then there's the opposite of, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed. I'm really struggling. My anxiety is like this. And it's like, okay, well, neither one of those are super healthy, if you're so fixated on everything that is wrong with you and really looking for that, or you act like everything is great and it's really not.
mhm,
And so just being open and honest about that, and sometimes with other people, but first with ourselves, just like, really, how am I? Like right now, I know that, like, I would like to say, hey, I'm fine. I'm not 100% fine right now. And part of that is because of a sleep thing for the past 2 days. And part of that is just I've overextended myself for the past while, more than a few days. And I know that. And I have I kind of have a plan in place for getting myself back on track, but then sometimes I get wrenches thrown in my plan. And because that's life and that's the way things
mhm,
go. And so it's being able to look at that and go, okay, you know what? Like, I can't, there are some things, today I had 2 meetings and they weren't, I mean, there were committee meetings. There were things that, yes, it would have been great to be at. I try to be at all of them, but it wasn't, I wasn't really letting anybody down by not being there. And I thought, as much as I want to be there, like, I need a nap instead. I mean, that's what I need to do for myself. And so, and that is what I did. And I worked on a couple of things that I needed to get done, coaching business wise, because I needed to get them done. And so it's being able to do those little things like that. And part of that just comes from being able to be honest and say, okay, things aren't going the way that I want them to right now, so what am I going to do about it?
Yeah, I appreciate your honesty and transparency about like we're all still on the journey. It doesn't matter what work you're doing, what degrees you have, what letters are next to your name, how many hours you've spent providing helping services to others. Like we're all human, we're all on this journey. And I appreciated when you said earlier, like it can be a slippery slope because I relate to that as well. Like once you're when you're the type of person that's disposed to giving a lot and your body and mind and habits and everything they know how to run at a certain pace. It's
Hmm.
very easy to slide back into that and not even realize that it's
Right.
happened until you start to get those signals from your
Hmm.
body.
Hmm.
Oh, I'm tired. Oh, I have a headache. Like I feel off. And if we don't check in, like we'll just run ourselves into the ground and often before we've even realized it. So I really think that's like half the battle is recognizing it, being able to pause ourselves because life is still going to happen. There's still going to be stressful things. There's still going to be long weeks. And like, don't let it get to the point that you're completely physically, mentally, and emotionally broken down because you put it off for so long.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think, and when we slow down and really look at things, that's why, like I like using the wheel of life, exercise with clients, where they're able to see right there in black and white, like, okay, this is why I'm feeling like this. I've got these things that are all out of whack. And I recently did that myself. Like I mentioned that I know one of my issues is with time management and being productive. Like I can be busy and have no idea what it is that I've done.
Yep.
And so I'm like, okay, as I get busier, I've got to get a little more, I've got to get more structure built in and more systems built in so that I don't feel like I'm just chasing my tail all the time. And so that's something that I've done to a certain degree, but I was like, I need a little more help with this. And so I'm working with a coach and working through a program on that now. And one of the things was doing a time audit. Okay, well, I know where my time goes, but I did this time audit. So, and I put it
You're like,
off because,
oh.
I'm like, oh, I don't really need to do that. Or, this week isn't, okay, none of my weeks are the same. All of my weeks are kind of wacky. So, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it because that's what I'm supposed to do before I move on to this other stuff that, of course, I've already listened to all of because that's what I do. Um,
Yes.
so, so I did this time audit, and then as I looked at it, and I'm highlighting things, and I'm like, no wonder I'm not getting other things done. Like I'm really involved with a lot of networking things right now. I'm trying to connect with people. I have a lot of goals for um, how I'm wanting to move my business forward, but it's like, but I'm doing so many of these things and doing workshops and trainings for other people that I'm not taking the time that I need there's things that I'm still wanting to learn and do myself. And then there's also programs that I want to develop and social media. I mean, you know how all of that stuff
Yep.
goes, where there's all the
It's a
content
balancing
stuff.
act. Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, well, that's why I'm not moving forward on any of that because I don't have the time to,
Yeah.
unless I'm wanting to get back into that. I'm working from 6 a.m. until 8 p.m. thing, and that's not where I want to be either. So
Nope.
just having that like pausing, and I still don't completely know the answer to all of that right now. I came to the awareness of, okay, well, it's not that you're failing. It's that there's legit not that much time left in the hours that I'm planning on working. And so, I need to figure out now, do I want to let some of these things go? How do I need to revamp my schedule so that I'm not in that position again? So it's always, I feel like stress relief and self-care, it's an ever evolving kind of thing. And sometimes it's really boring practical things. People a lot of times they'll think that, it's like, oh, well, self-care, well, I don't have time to go to the spa. Well, it's more than the spa, which
Uh-huh.
nothing against that. I'm all for massages. I get them regularly. I know that's how my body runs best. But, but it's so much more than that. It's things like looking at your schedule. It's getting sleep. It's drinking enough water. It's getting up and taking a break when you've been sitting for 2 hours in the same cramped position, all those little things that I still remind myself about.
Yeah.
So it's just so important to do those things like making our doctor's appointments. And, Kayla, I think you hit it right on the head when you were talking about the people who don't who don't really take the time to do those things or feel like they don't have time for that. And one of the things that I talk to especially women about, and I had somebody that she's a grandmother and she's raising her grandkids, and she's like, I don't have time for self-care. And that's when you really need it the most,
Yeah.
because when you have all these people that are counting on you and you feel like you don't have time to take care of yourself because you have all these people counting on you, well, what's going to happen if something happens to you? And it's nobody likes to think about that, but that's the reality. And part of that, I mean, I have worked in hospice for years, so my mind does kind of go that way a little bit, but that's just, I mean, none of us know how things are going to be, and we need to take care of ourselves as best as we can. And that doesn't have to mean that it's a full-time job. It doesn't have to be complicated, simple little things. And I mean, things like breathing. I mean,
Yeah.
stopping and like breathing right is is huge. I mean, it's so impactful on so many levels. Um, Being hydrated, drinking a couple glasses of water,
Yeah.
it's those little things that we dismiss because, well, I know that. Well, I know all kinds of things. That doesn't mean I do them all. And
Uh-huh.
so, it's just it's coming back to those basics a lot of times.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think we do have like a narrative in our culture that does kind of make self-care feel like it's this glamorous thing that is for a special designated set aside time, or that you're always going to feel peaceful when you're doing self-care. Like, that's not reality. Sometimes you might, maybe if you're lucky, but self-care happens like in the middle of the chaos when everything's busy and you make sure you grab your water bottle on the way out the door, or you make yourself go to bed rather than staying up and binge watching a show, or you make yourself get out and take a walk because you know your body needs to move even though you're tired and you don't feel like it. Like it's not glamorous. It's all of those things that we know are good for us. And if we know, why do we not do them? Why do we not give ourselves permission? And I think
Hmm.
part of it, especially for women, especially for caregivers, is there's a story playing somewhere in the background that everyone else's needs are more important than ours, or we feel guilty, like it somehow makes us bad to put
Hmm.
ourselves first, even for 5 minutes.
Yep.
How do you support people through some of that narrative? Like, there's so much guilt, I think, for women around even taking 5 minutes.
Hmm.
It can feel really hard.
Right, right. And yes, that's I mean, that's why my book is called Self-Care Isn't Selfish, because that is something that we tell ourselves, and that I think we kind of pick up on that from a young age. A lot of us do, um, is that we need to be good. We need to take care of everybody else. And I think when we're somebody that's wired to help other people, then that just adds on to that. And so one of the things that I do is I talk to women about, about kind of what we just talked about is, what if you're not there? You've got people counting on you. And so because of that, you need to take care of yourself. That's not the reason to neglect yourself. That's another reason to take care of yourself. And like just you in and of yourself, even without that, you're worth it. And so part of it is kind of working on some of that, that worth. What makes you uniquely you? And we all have flaws. We all have things that maybe we wish were a little different or that annoy us about ourselves, but we're all individuals. And I mean, I myself am, I'm a Jesus follower. And so I believe that, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And like, so not only like from a DNA level, we're different, but, from a higher level, like we're here this way for this reason. And but I also believe that because I do work with quite a few Christian women as well, and that adds kind of another layer because, well, we're supposed to be serving everybody else. That's what we do. And we can only do that for so long unless we're taking care of ourselves. And so it's somewhat of a mindset shift, I think, to realizing that that when you take care of yourself, you're able to care better for others. And also that it doesn't have to be this big chore. It's little things that can fit into your life and figuring out like what it is that you need, because again, what I need is different than what you need. And and that may change too from day to day or season to season, but just really taking the time to figure out like what do I need? And that's a question that I ask myself when I'm, especially when I just feel like things are so out of control, and or I don't know where to start. And I just, I'll pause and I'll take a deep breath or two and just think, what do I need most right now?
Mm.
And most of the time, whatever it is simple. It may be, I need a nap. I need a snack. I need a glass of water. I need to get up for a minute. I need to step away. I need a few minutes to myself. I need a few minutes with some other people. It's those little things. And sometimes it's I need a vacation, and I've got one of those coming up and I'm excited about it. But we can't just take vacations all the time. But even with that, figuring out like what do I like about the thought of taking a vacation? Is it having some time away from what I'm working on? Is it having a break from caregiving? A little time off work, or is it a new experience, maybe spending some time in nature or going someplace and having really good food, and figuring out, are there ways that we can bring a little bit of that into our daily lives?
Yeah, like the little mini vacations that we could gift ourselves, the little adventures, the park that's down the street that you never go to, the
Yes.
restaurant you've been wanting to check out. Like there are those opportunities to have some of that. Like I think we idolize and put vacation on a pedestal, and vacations are great. I love them.
Me
I take them often, but
too.
but you're right. We can bring them into our day, into our week, into our regular life in a smaller capacity, the elements of them that most nourish us, that most light us
Hmm.
up. And I loved the power of the question, which is such a simple question, but some people are so disconnected from their needs to even just pause and ask, what do I need?
Hmm.
When you're early in this work, you might not even know right away. Like it takes a while of like
Hmm.
befriending yourself to even be able to hear the messages of what you need. But to stop and ask yourself that and force yourself to think about it is
Hmm.
so powerful.
Hmm. And I find that, especially if I have somebody that's feeling stuck, I mean, if I ask somebody that, especially like you said, somebody that's new to even like considering, oh, what do you mean? What do I need?
Yeah.
I need to take care of everybody else. That's what I need.
Uh-huh.
And so, for that, it's the initial reaction is most of the time, well, I don't know. Or, well, or I need a day off, or I need, but when you just sit with it a little bit longer, and I think that's the thing too, we're always in such a hurry. And I mean, and I get it. I'm in a hurry too. I listen to most things on time and a half or double speed. But there's times when we do need to just really slow down and just let things sit instead of just, well, I don't know, or something, pops in your head and you're like, okay, moving on to the next thing. Really being there with it. And sometimes that's just sitting there and kind of thinking about it. What do I need? Sometimes that's journaling. And for me, I've gotten out of the habit of it right now because, busy. But I would get up of a morning and I would do my 3 pages of morning pages. I don't know. Are you familiar with Julia Cameron and the
Yeah.
morning pages thing? Yeah. So you just, with that, you just sit down and you just randomly just start writing just whatever's in your head. And sometimes it's, it's like, oh my gosh, everything's so great. And other times it's just like random things. Sometimes it's my to-do list. But what I find is when I do that, when I just take that time to just let my mind go, I'll come up with all kinds of stuff. I get cool ideas. I remember things that I'd forgotten. Sometimes things come up that I had no idea it was going to go like that. And it's just taking that bit of time and space to do that. Or getting up and moving, when things just feel stuck, then getting up and going for a walk. And sometimes I'll turn on my phone recorder and I'll just kind of verbally process, I'll just talk to myself while I walk. And just it helps to move and get some things unstuck. And it's those little simple things like that that can really have a big impact without taking a lot of time or effort. And and of course breathing in the bathroom, that's another
Yes.
one of my go-tos, because you're in there, you have a minute or two to yourself, just take a couple of deep breaths too. And
Right. Do a
and
breathing exercise. It works
exactly.
anywhere.
Right, right. And just do that to kind of reset yourself a little bit, You deserve to take an extra 30 seconds in the bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved the that you brought up like the morning pages or the audio like kind of mental dumps. Or like just
Mm-hmm.
like try
Mm-hmm.
where do we just take everything that's going on in our brain and give it somewhere to be to kind of self-organize, because there is a lot of power in that. And I think when you have permission to, I don't have to be doing anything right now except for processing, thinking, writing, whatever this like outlet activity is, it clears up so much energy and so much space for other stuff to then come in, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like we're adding to our mental load by not letting some of this stuff have somewhere to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I do that. Sometimes I will just, I'll turn that on like while I'm driving, and because I drive a lot. And so, it's like I haven't really had the time to journal, and and my mind's just like da 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 da. And so I'll just turn that on, and I will just chat with myself while I'm driving down the road. And sometimes I ask myself questions and then I answer them. And I'll do a little bit of self-coaching in that way. And sometimes I just ramble on, and then I'm able to, sometimes I come up with some really good ideas, and other times I just get it out of my head. Either way, it's a
Hmm.
win. And getting that extra bit of clarity, and then I can go back and listen to it if I did have any moments of brilliance, and and if not, then I delete it and move on. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just a simple way to be able to, kind of multitask, even though, we can't multitask a lot of the ways that we try to, but that's one that is helpful, if I'm doing that or doing housework or something like that, and just being able to do a little bit of those things together.
Yeah, I love that. It's such a practical and accessible, I think, entryway into some of it, because when it does feel hard or you don't know where to start, like just start where you're at with whatever thoughts you're thinking and put them
Mm-hmm.
somewhere. Like
Yeah.
that's part of noticing them, like bringing them to awareness. And maybe you didn't know what you needed before you did this, but you recognize a pattern of the things you're saying or the things that you're writing, and you, oh, that's really on my mind. That's really bothering me. Maybe I need something here. That
Mm-hmm.
stuff starts to emerge kind of naturally.
Yes, yes, for sure. And it's simple. It's something that, and again, I mean, everything that I practice, everything that I teach and I share, none of it's rocket science, but it's going a little bit deeper from just the knowing and into the doing, and being able to do without it being cumbersome. And I think once you start just incorporating these little bits of stress relief, little bits of self-care into your life, then you realize, oh, you know what? Like this isn't so bad. Yeah.
Yeah, you start to
And maybe
feel
I want to do
better.
more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something to this.
Yes. So I want to circle back because I feel like this is kind of a good time to like come full circle to the becoming method. And I
Yes.
don't think I commented on this when you introduced it earlier, but I love that it's called becoming. And I
Mm-hmm.
loved your explanation as to why, and like the never arriving and being in
Mm-hmm.
peace with where we're at, while also being fully present with the process of
Mm-hmm.
becoming.
Mm-hmm.
And who are we becoming along the way? Like it's such a fascinating thing that we as humans get to embark on. So I just love all of that. And I didn't say it, so I want to say it now as
Oh,
I
well, thank you so
reintroduce this.
much.
Yeah, it's
Thank
like,
you.
oh,
I appreciate that.
that's beautiful. Um, and I think this is a good time as we're getting a little bit close to the end here to think about. You went through really briefly each of these steps of your method, and I know this was influenced by your work as a registered nurse, and so it's systematic
Mm-hmm.
and it's practical. Are there any particular stages within this method that you tend to spend a lot of time or people struggle with that maybe you could shed some light on for the listeners?
Ooh, that's a good question. And I've never specifically thought about that before. So give me just a moment.
Yeah,
Um,
I love coming in with the questions.
yes, yes. So really it does depend on the person, but part of it is looking at where, um, like what kind of thing. So in the like the EC area, and excitement and the things that light you up and the things that uniquely are you, because we don't always think about those things, and we discount the things that are special about us because they're not special to us. I mean, that's just who we are. That's what we do. And so that's something that a lot of times we focus a little bit more on because it's just not anything that we've done. And it's very easy to dismiss that, oh, well, well, yeah, but that's just, that's not a big deal. This superpower that I have, it's not a big deal. And so sometimes working with clients to have them um, reach out to maybe to some friends or to some people that they know and like, hey, what do you think of when you think of me? And because the way that the way that other people see us sometimes is very different than the way that we see ourselves. And now, and I do have that caveat there for people who really don't have supportive people in their circle. If you know that that's you, that you have like you're surrounded by a lot of negativity, then don't reach out and ask. Because that's going to be something that's just hurtful to you, and that probably is much more of a reflection on those people than it is on you. So then we can work on things a little differently from that situation. But if you're somebody who, like, yeah, people tell me that I'm, good at this particular thing, but it's not a big deal, then that's a good way to start looking at some of those things and then thinking about, okay, look, so these people are saying these kind of things about you, and that doesn't mean that you are replacing their judgment with your own, but are all of them wrong? Is it possible that maybe this is something really, really cool? And one thing that I like to encourage people to do is to keep a wins file. And so those things that we know that we've done well. And so it may be, yes, maybe it's you get an award or you get a promotion, or, somebody writes you a card and says, hey, you really made a difference when you did this particular thing. But it's also those things that maybe nobody else knows, but we know, hey, you know what? I was scared to death to do this particular thing. And I did it. And I kind of did a good job at it. And so maybe it's, I did it and it didn't go well, but I learned these things from it.
Yeah.
And I did it. And I know that, I lived through doing it. And so now maybe I can do something like that again, because we all have times when things just aren't going to um, they're not going to go smoothly. And we're going to have those times when even when things are going okay, like we just feel, we just have those down times. And we need something to be able to look back and go, hey, you know what? Like, I'm kind of awesome. And, I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. I don't have to excel in every area to be like this amazing person. And I have all of these good qualities. So I think that is something where I spend quite a bit of time, and then thinking about like what really matters most. So moving into the meaning, and looking at values, looking at what matters most to you as an individual. And again, that might be something that's different than it was 5, 10, 20 years ago, because we are changing, like our circumstances change, our lives evolve. It's if you've got little kids at home versus being empty nesters, life is different then. So yeah, those are probably the two biggest areas.
Yeah, I love that you started with the like the excitement and then the confidence and what makes you uniquely you, because I think you're right. It's hard for people to own their strengths, their
Mhm.
gifts, and then it's also hard to give yourself permission and to pay attention to those moments where you're most lit up, where you're most
Mhm.
excited, and to like seek to build more of that into your life. And the reason I love that you pulled on these two is because like that is how I live my life now.
Hmm.
Like post burnout, like that's how I rebuilt my life. I mean, I didn't have your model, which I think the systematic way of working through it is so helpful for people. But I did learn like I need to pay attention to how I feel after I do something. And when I
Mm-hmm.
feel really good and when I feel excited and I feel lit up, I need more of that. I need to be
Yes.
on purpose in building more of that into my life. And it's so powerful because then you're not just recovering from burnout, you're building a life of passion, of purpose, of excitement. And that
Yes.
feels really good.
Right, right. Because, the goal is not to just not be miserable.
Mhm.
You know? Um, I say my least favorite F word is fine. Like fine is not, I mean, unless we're talking about fine dining or something, and even
Right.
then I'm not a huge fan, but but it's like I just believe that we're made for more than that. And yeah, being able to like really feel passionate and excited about at least areas of your life. Not everything is fabulous and not everything is wonderful all the time, but taking the time to figure out like what are those things that really make me feel great, and then yeah, how do I fit those into my life? Because again, it doesn't have to be super complicated. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, doesn't have to take a lot of money. There's honestly so many things are just like the simplest. Um, I don't consider myself outdoorsy in terms of, like I don't like to go out and garden, and in my head I do, but the reality is I don't really like hot stuff. I don't like hot and humid weather, but I love to be out in nature and seeing trees, and I love sunsets and sunrises, and sometimes I like them from the air conditioning if it's super hot. But that and the, oceans or water or whatever, just those things that most of us have access to something like that around us. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to mean going to the beach. I live in Indiana. There's not a beach super near, but there are little streams, there are ponds, there are lakes, and so just figuring out how to get those little bits of things into our lives, and it makes a huge difference.
It really
And we're
does.
worth it.
Yes. Yeah. The worthiness piece, right? Like
Yes,
we
absolutely.
deserve to have a life that's more than fine.
Right. Absolutely. Yes.
This has been such a good conversation. Before we wrap up, is there anything that you hoped that we would talk to and we didn't, or anything you just really want to share with the listeners who maybe they're struggling with this, they're trying to figure out the balance, the self-care picture. I just want to open it to you to see if there's anything else that wants to be said before we can tell people where to find you and wrap up.
Well, um, I mean, I feel like we've had a really good
We
conversation. So,
have.
and thank you for that because you've been good at keeping things going when I've gotten a little squirrely. But so I think, so the other day I did, well, it was actually a month ago today, I did a presentation for National Caregivers Day, and it was for some caregivers here locally, and one of the women said, "Well, I said, what kind of things bring you joy?" And she said, "Well, I really like to sew." And I said, "Oh, okay. So is that something you do often?" And she said, "No, I have this deal with myself that, I'm when I get my to-do list done, when I get my things done, then I'm going to sew. That's my reward." And I said, "Okay, what if you like flipped that? And what if instead of that being your reward, what if you thought, you know what, I'm going to take some time to sew because that's something that brings me joy. And then what if maybe doing that like gave you more energy, gave you more desire to get those other things done? What if you flipped that?" And she was like, "Oh, hmm." And I said, "Well, well, so what do you like to sew?" And she said, "Well, I've got a 1-year-old granddaughter and I'd really like to sew her some clothes." And I was like, "How would that feel?" And so she did consider maybe sewing that weekend. And honestly, I haven't talked to her, so I don't know what happened with that. But I've had a couple other people who mentioned that to me that were there and said, that was just such a mindset shift for me. Um, And honestly, it wasn't anything that I'd really thought about that much either until in the moment. And I thought, why do we do that? It's like those of us who exercise so that, we can eat more, or we reward ourselves with something that maybe isn't super helpful for us. It's the things that we do kind of on autopilot that we just maybe need to question a little bit more. So I think being curious is a great way to kind of start to explore self-care or stress relief, especially if you're somebody who's like, I don't know about all that, just kind of, what if, or maybe I could, and just be open to where that leads you.
Yeah, I love that story so much. That's such a powerful, like you said, mental shift. But I think part of the power of that is that it makes you realize how often we deprive ourselves of joy until we've earned it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we don't have to earn it. And if we gave ourselves permission to have it more, we could probably be more fulfilled in the other things we were doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's I love having conversations like this because it's such a good reminder, I mean, even though you and I are both doing like work with people in this, that's part of the reason why I love doing it is because
Yeah.
as I continue to have these conversations, I'm like, oh yeah, I should be
Uh,
doing that again.
Good
And there I am
accountability.
shouldn't. Exactly. Right. It's like, well, I don't want to be a total hypocrite, so I better figure out how to balance things a little better for myself too.
Yes, 100%. It does it keeps us on track and
Hmm.
we're still human, so no one's perfect.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
So this has been such a joy. I've loved every moment of this conversation. Before we say goodbye, let the listeners know where they can find you if they want to connect with you, if they want to read your book. I'll put it in the show notes, but I always like to hear from the guest directly.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. So, yes, I'm on social media, except, well, I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on the things that I think of for younger people. Just because really there's only so many hours in the day, but I am on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, and Jenny Lytle or Jenny Lytle RN, depending which one. My website's jennylytle.com. But really the easiest way to connect with me is if you just go to selfcareisn'tselfish.com, then you can get a free digital copy of my book, which is Self-Care Isn't Selfish, the Compassionate Nurse's Step-by-Step Guide to Personalized Stress Relief. And that's something that's available on Amazon in, paperback, hardback, Kindle, and audiobook, but you can get a free digital copy by going there. And then you can stay connected with me that way.
Amazing. Well, I hope everybody that's listening connects with Jenny and stays up to date with all of the amazing things she's doing in the world. I have loved this conversation. Thank you again for just showing up fully, transparently, with a good sense of humor, good stories, and so many great tips for people to take away. I'm definitely feeling lit up after this conversation, so thank you.
Well, thank you, Kayla. I really appreciate it. I started out feeling kind of tired, and yes, I feel great too. So I really appreciate everything that you're doing, and I love seeing your smiling face on Instagram, and I love what you're putting out into the world, and I appreciate you sharing your platform with me for a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been amazing. Everyone that's listening, try to take something from this and make it real in your lives. And take really good care of yourselves. Carve out a couple minutes somewhere today that you can give yourself a little love. And we will talk soon. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you want more resources on thriving in your life or want details on working with me, check out my website at internallyguidedleadership.com or follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok at Internally Guided Coach. Be gentle with yourselves out there, and I'll talk to you next time.